Now that you have learned how to apply color, temperature, and complementary colors to rendering an object to look three-dimensional, we call this color theory. Now we will use color theory and apply these same principles to another object. Color theory and value. Just like when we begin with a black and white value study, we're going to begin our color value study with a value scale. On this value scale, we will move from light to dark, creating 6 distinct values for our color. As usual, our lightest value is white. You'll use your white colored pencil to shade in the first box. Now, you might think it's redundant to color in a box white on a white piece of paper, but when you're creating an actual piece of artwork, it's important that your whole composition has the same consistency and finished look to it. So by using a white colored pencil, we give this part of the paper the same texture and consistency as the rest. Our next lightest will be white plus our local color. So I'll begin very lightly with a coating of white. And then I will use my local color. In this case, we're using red. Always using the circular motion to try to achieve the smoothest look. And as always, I want to sandwich my colors. So I'm going to add another layer of white on top. And lastly, I'm going to use my colorless blender, making sure it's clean before I begin. Remember, when we begin to apply all of these colors to our object, you'll have many different values in between pure white and this lighter red that will help this fade into this. So these aren't the only 2 light values we will use. There will be many in between. As I work down my spectrum, my next darkest is going to be the warm version of my color. So if I look back to my color theory practice, I can see that the warm version of my color is red-orange. So to achieve red-orange, I begin with a thin layer of red. I then use a layer of yellow. I can also go ahead and use a layer of orange, depending on how many colored pencils you have. And then I'll go back to another layer of red on top. And blend. As I get into this area, my next darkest color will be just my pure local color. Even though I'm only going to be putting red in this square, notice I'm still starting with kind of a light layer. I'm pushing a little harder than I normally would if I were blending. But it's always good to start out light and build from there. And I might even go as far as using my colorless blender, simply because when I do all of this on an object, that's what I'll be using. My next darkest color will be the cool version of my color. So again, I go back to my color theory worksheet and I can see that the cool version of my color is red violet. To create red violet, I begin with a layer of red, and I know I've mentioned this before, but notice how I don't have a very pointy colored pencil. It's very flattened right now, and that helps me get a smoother consistency. I add a layer of violet, and another layer of red. Then I can use my colorless blender to blend. And lastly, my darkest color will be my subdued color. Which will be the color plus its complement. Now, when I look at my color theory worksheet and I look at my complementary colors, I know that the complement of red is green. However, I'm going to be working more in this section here rather than equal parts of the two colors. That way my dark value is still leaning towards the red side. And I'll save that equal distribution for cast shadows when I want things to be completely dark. Now, depending on how dark I want this section to be, I might choose apple green or I might choose grass green. In fact, on my little value scale here, I'll do both so that you can see the difference. Both will subdue the red into a darker red, but you'll get much different results with two different versions of green. So I added in my green. I'm going back with another layer of red on top to sandwich everything in. And then I'll go back and blend. So you can see that by adding the green, I've created a really deep red color. And you can see two different versions of that kind of subdued red. So it's not only darker, but it's also less intense. It has a more natural, earthy feel to it. So that is going to be the value scale that I use when I begin to render my ribbon down here. So for every color that you use, you might want to create a value scale for each one.